Thank you everyone for joining. It's a very intimate room. I like this because you can share, maybe include you guys a little bit in this discussion today. Now we will talk about Web3 social tooling. Yeah, and the flyer is being changed so you can also see who is here on stage. I'm Zoe. I'm VP of Growth and Partner at Phala Network. We provide decentralized computation infrastructure. Perfect, thank you so much. And focusing a lot on the Web3 social space right now, working with the Graph, with Lens, hopefully also soon with Asaf from Addressable. And today we want to discuss a little bit about trends in Web3 social overall, and we have really 3 experts here on stage. And again, if you guys have questions also, we will try to make this a bit interactive today. So we have Kai, Director of Business Development from the Graph. We have Asaf, who's CSO of Addressable, and of course Nader, Head of or Director of DevRel from Lens Protocol. Perfect, guys. So I think most of your platforms or technologies are known, but if you want to chime in a little bit and explain some backgrounds, but let's actually start with the overall question about maturity of Web3 social. I think it's good to keep the room engaged and say, okay, where we are actually standing at the moment. And we are talking about Web3 social tooling, but try maybe also to put this word into the context of SocialFi, which is maybe similar, a bit different. Like, how would you explain the maturity of the space that we are working in? Kyle, if you'd like to start.
Yeah, sure. I'd say that, in short, things are immature, and that's because things are just starting out. People are just building on things like Lens. There's a lot of trial and error happening. And if you think back to 2017 era, the infrastructure stack was just being built out. White papers were coming out. Now we have solid protocols that can be used to build, and the DX, the development experience, has gotten a lot better. But SocialFi has just started trying to find product market fit. So a lot of people are tooling, a lot more people are coming to the space, which is a great leading indicator of what's to come. But yeah, Nader, you two would probably have a lot more context there.
Entirely agree with everything said. Want to add to that the user experience for a lot of the SocialFi protocols has improved dramatically over the past years. I think that part of what we see today is how some of the content on existing Web2 socials are making it so easy for users to transition into Web3 social and SocialFi without having to necessarily go into a lot of the technical complexities behind that. And I think this is something that is going to just improve over time and definitely improve and accelerate the adoption.
All right. I think that it's actually come a long way, because if you look at, there was a talk that was given by the head of Instagram and the head of now Threads. I forgot his name. I was actually just looking it up here because I wanted to kind of quote him. Adam Mosseri. This was at the end of 2022, so not that long ago. He gave a talk called A Creator-Led Internet Built on the Blockchain. And you wouldn't expect like someone from the biggest social company in the world or in history to be talking about this, and also the person that's in charge of the technology. They recently launched Threads. Threads was just, to most people, just another social app. But they actually are now focused on what in the past were like Web3 ideas. Portable social graph is one. They allowed people to take their social graph from Instagram into Threads. But more importantly, one of the first posts that he made on Threads was focused on talking about decentralization, censorship resistance, and porting your social graph in the form of a decentralized infrastructure called ActivityPub. Now, I thought that was really, really interesting, because now you have the 2 biggest social founders in the history of the world, Jack Dorsey and Mark Zuckerberg, both building decentralized social networks. And I think that that's a massive, massive signal that we are working in the right direction, but also it should be validation for everyone here that believes in this technology that things are coming along. And I do think that we are to the point now where we can start building the type of infrastructure, we can start building the type of applications, because the infrastructure is ready to support that stuff today, not tomorrow, but literally today. And I think that, well, that's something I'll kind of speak to a little bit further along. Some of the stuff that we have worked on at Lens and also based on some of my experience at AWS before I joined Lens.
Cool. I mean, let's do a little poll, right? I guess, I mean, there's no question if every one of you guys uses Twitter, but who of you guys uses any other decentralized social application? Lenster, Threads, yeah. Okay. Could be more in the room, but I think it's a good turnout. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, we just talked about SocialFi. Dune's dashboard, I think, is a good go-to source to get a bit of these numbers. And I need to look it up here already. 4 million users in Web3 Social, almost around like 20 unique platforms that are also used in Web3 Social. So looking into also you guys working specifically in it, but also since several years being users of Web3 Social, what kind of trends do you currently see are coming up for dApp builders or also from a protocol level, from a tooling provider level? You understand?
Yeah. I think that a lot of the value of decentralized social network is that the data goes out in the open. Unlike the walled gardens of the existing Facebook or Twitter in which everything is locked inside, there's lots of value of data going on the outside. I think that with the 20 existing platform today and with the 4 million users, it's a huge opportunity to release the data and help a lot of the users better understand the trends of what's going around and build on top of that. I think this is definitely something that's going forward.
I've got some views. I'd say I'll take that from 3 different points of view. 1 is the developer experience, 2 is the user experience, and then 3, users themselves. As Nader mentioned, the developer experience is getting better, but it still has a long way to go until Web 2 developers are able to simply come over and build. There are tens of thousands of Web 3 developers, and let's say Solidity. There's millions of C and C++, and there's tens of millions of Rust developers. So until you unlock that DX for everyone around the world, people in gaming, people in social, elsewhere, I think that's going to be a type of blocker. And then on the user experience level, right now, you can just sign into Twitter or LinkedIn or whatever. You still have a Web3 native UX, which is a hindering, or let's say a blocker or a hurdle for people to come over. So that needs to get better, but that trend is happening. People are tooling around to find out, let's say with that account abstraction, what's going to change the UX game a lot, and that will lead to users. DX needs to come first so people actually build cool things. UX needs to get better to make it easier, and then more users will come because 4 million is not the 2 or 3 billion that Facebook or Meta alone has. So I think it's a good trend, but it's going to take a little bit.
What was the main question?
Like general trends you at the moment see in SocialFi or Web3 Social from a protocol level, dApp level?
I think like one thing is that everything that Web3 was like inspiring to me about a couple of years ago that wasn't actually coming to fruition. Composability and interoperability and open public data that powers a lot of the things that in the past were stored in traditional databases were just like theory, and there wasn't really a lot of actual use cases outside of finance, which is really interesting to us, but it's not interesting to 99%, to be quite honest, of the world, and not interesting to anyone I know outside of tech, which spoke a lot to me, meaning that we need kind of a use case. And the fact that 5 billion people in the world use social, the fact that Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, all these big founders are moving in that direction tells me that this is going to be like the big unlock in terms of onboarding users. So that has inspired a lot of people to get involved and start building. And these ideas around interoperability and composability are starting to come to fruition in certain ecosystems. So with Lens, we see people that are kind of taking the public data and they're building out custom recommendation algorithms. They're building out their own SDKs and their own APIs because the data is no longer siloed. And with what happened with Twitter and what happened with Reddit and what happened with all of these APIs that in the past people would build businesses on, they would wake up the next day and their businesses are shut down or they're out of business because Twitter just decides to arbitrarily change their pricing model or just delete the access to a certain API. They know that cannot happen anymore, and therefore they can confidently build, and that just excites a lot of developers. So. You
gave the key point APIs, and I think something very important is like decentralized decentralizing APIs more, right? Like the Lens API itself is not completely decentralized, but I think you're also working on decentralizing this more for developers. You guys do a very good job in this. Kyle, what kind of advice or recommendation would you give protocols or other builders to actually provide decentralized APIs, which I think is very advanced in tooling for Web3 social?
Yeah, sure. I think anytime someone builds in Web3, but especially social, you need to figure out three things. One is the right layer, so you need to choose which oracle you use to put off-chain data on-chain, because social is a lot of off-chain data. Right layer, then you choose your recording layer, which blockchain or blockchains you're going to build on, and then you need the read layer, so which is the graph. What the graph is working on, the graph is decentralizing that read layer. And if any one of those pieces of the stack are centralized, then a dApp is just an app, and an app is just more Web 2 technology, and it will end up with Web 2 results. So we must have decentralized infrastructure on those pieces of the stack, as well as everything else. Otherwise, like you were saying, it's not unbreakable data. It's not true verifiability, transparency, true ownership, and permissionlessness, as well as getting communities to build. Because DeFi protocols, others are so powerful because the communities can build permissionlessly on top of them. So I think to do that, go use decentralized protocols. Go use decentralized pieces of the stack. Do your research. If you want to reach out, Nader, Asaf, everyone, all of us can help. We're happy to walk you through it, even if it's not with the protocols we work on, but go build on decentralized applications, because that's the only thing that can build truly Web3 protocols.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And Asaf, you're with Addressable, right? You're bringing mainly Web 2 data also on chain, or merging Web 2 data with Web 3 data. Actually, you're on a different tech stack, right? We have protocol level, we have indexer tooling. You guys are actually very high level for the end user to see what's up with this data in social. So what challenges do you see actually providing this off-chain data on chain?
So that's true. Addressable lives at the higher part of the stack. And is it working?
Yeah, that's better.
So Addressable lives at the higher part of the stack, on which we're trying to associate the Web 2 and the Web 3 data. And a lot of why that's important is that so we're able to take the portion that is currently found a lot on the Facebook and the centralized part of the world, and drawing that effectively into the Web 3 part of Web 3 social. This is a lot of what we're focused on, growing Web3 by making that connection and helping draw a lot of the attention from the common and popular to decentralized social platforms.
So Addressable takes basically real-world data and makes it available in an oracle or in the smart contract? Is that kind of what you all do, or what do you all do? Sorry.
So that's part of the vision. At the existing part in time, it's mostly a SaaS to make it most easily usable for marketers all across. We're collaborating with the Lens team, for instance. I think that at the long run, a lot of that will become more decentralized, more in-chain, more fruitful. But at the moment, we're looking to make that as easily to use as possible.
Cool. I need to look more into that.
I guess you work already together, right? Indirectly,
well, we have teams,
but not you directly. Yeah, it's great connections here. So, who of you guys was at ETH directly, and maybe saw Stani's talk about Lens V2? Okay, some of you. If not, check it out online, because this is actually what Lens is working on right at the moment, Lens V2. And another question to you, as you just announced it, what role do you see in the advancement of your protocol, or what role of off-chain computation, as well as scalability, do you see in the advancement of your protocol? Also, like one topic, Momoka, that you developed on your own, but especially the off-chain part. How important do you see it in Lens V2 itself?
I mean, it seems like the main use case that people are used to with social is just off-chain stuff, you know? If you look at Twitter and Instagram and all these apps, most of the, actually everything happening, right, is just a piece of data going into a database. So the only things that require a blockchain are financial actions for the most part, you know? But there are also other edge cases or other use cases that I wouldn't even call them edge cases, obviously, like joining a DAO or voting in a DAO or collecting an NFT for free or something like that. These are still on-chain actions, I guess, that are essentially, like low value that wouldn't be considered financial but are on chain. And then there are the new primitives that are enabled through Web3 social, like peer-to-peer payments and cutting out the middleman, being able to advertise directly with a creator and vice versa, being able to find people to pay you to do stuff on social networks. And then you have a few other examples of things like you can set up a campaign and send a tweet out, and it will be tagged as if you have 1,000 followers and you're connected to this person and you retweet this, you earn $20 just by clicking a button. So these are like the financial things that are really just impossible to do. And I think those are the use cases that will be useful for that type of off-chain computation, because people could then build integrations into the smart contracts and build out new experiences that just didn't exist before. So I think that those are the things that are the most interesting, because they're the things that are not possible with like traditional social.
Cool. Thank you. And we just talked about off-chain information, bringing it on-chain. I would like to ask you about like rating specifically, how you would see the need for programmable oracles. I know that oracles play a big role in our industry, or especially also in SocialFi, or as we just described it. However, there is also a new trend for developing programmable oracles that can be actually owned by the developers itself, and then help dApps to bring off-chain information on-chain into their smart contracts. What kind of need would you see for it? I know, Asaf, you have a strong opinion. And why would you rate your opinion like this, if it's low or high? And Asaf, if you understand.
I think it's a very high important. I think it manifests the composability and the importance of putting all of the data in one single database that's available to everyone and to build on top. I do, however, think that at the current state of things, the data needs to still be more easily accessible and built and structured and be very flexible for the use. I do think that the long-term vision is to have everything on-chain, everything consumable via oracles to both directions, both off-chain to on-chain and the other way around. I think it's going to take a bit more time to build, and it needs to gradually go to that, but I think it's of very high importance.
Okay, so everything needs to be on-chain at one point, you're saying?
Ideally, we should strive to that point. Personal opinion, I don't think it will ever be pure everything on chain, but I think that we have mileage to go. I think that we will get much better with putting much more of the things off chain to create better transparency, better composability, and we'll need to scale the technology for that. It will be very difficult, but this should be the long-term vision.
Well, develop the right tooling to get the off-chain information on-chain, right? But it needs to be consolidated. Kyle, what's your opinion on this?
I can't speak too much to the programmable oracles, but I do agree that more and more information is going on-chain, RWAs, so real-world assets, and beyond just financial stuff, it's reputation, it's profiles, it's personal information, PII, eventually through ZK technology, so personal identifiable information that all will potentially be on-chain, maybe in tandem with off-chain stuff that's in the Web2 world, but the more that becomes in the on-chain environment, beyond just financial transactions, the more we can trust because of the trustlessness and the consensus layer of the actual blockchain, as opposed to trusting Google to keep that information in private servers, in silos that can be changed, that can be shut down. You got a killed by Google.com when you're talking about businesses like Twitter shutting stuff down. That happens all the time. And that's because right now in the Web2 world, there's a client-server relationship where whoever owns the server owns everything. It owns the data, it owns all your profiles, it owns all your photos on Instagram, Twitter, Meta. So we have to change that by putting more information on-chain, and therefore making it more Web3 and unbreakable, which there's only one way to do that.
Okay, so like when I first got into Web3, I had been working in the traditional tech space for like 8 years, again, over 3 years at AWS, directly before coming into the blockchain space. And I became fascinated and bought into this whole idea of decentralization and everything should be on chain. And when someone from my old job would ask me, like, why would you even build with the blockchain? It doesn't need to be that way. I would get really defensive and I would be like, no, you have to do it this way because all these things. But now I'm actually not I don't believe that anymore. Mainly because like we now have other options and there are things that you can do that I would consider like hybrid solutions that you can do like right this second that actually preserve immutability, permanence, censorship resistance that don't require a traditional financial blockchain. And when I say financial blockchain, blockchains exist into everyone's mind for the most part as a form of state updates and changes that are available to everyone in the network that prevent the double spend problem. But you don't need to prevent the double spend problem for most of the use cases where public data is important, in my opinion. I'll quickly touch on the fact that with LLMs becoming more prominent, all this data is becoming siloed. So you have like Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, all moving towards blocking their data or asking people to pay for it. So therefore, public data, like what we in the past would have thought to put on a blockchain, is going to become more and more important because that public data can then be read by these LLMs, in my opinion, which will continue to be more and more I would say prevalent. So how can you build a system that preserves immutability, censorship resistance, and permanence without it being on a financial blockchain? Well, you use data storage layers, data availability layers, and a similar sort. There's Celestia, there's EigenLayer DA, there's Arbitrum Nova, which is using a data availability committee. These are all different implementations of data availability and data storage. And what we've used at Lens to enable around 40,000 transactions per second that we've actually tested in the real world. This isn't like theoretical. We're using Arweave with Bundler Network on top, 8 millisecond latency. It's faster than a lot of traditional Web2 databases, and it's 1,000 times or so cheaper and around 1,000 times more scalable than even an L2 sidechain like Polygon that we were using in the past. And what this basically allows you to achieve is you have all of the best of both worlds. When I store a post on Twitter, and he does as well, at the same time, the blockchain doesn't need to care about who posted first. All you need to know is that data is going to be around 10 years from now, and that's the only thing that matters. So why would you restrict yourself by building on a network that prevents that, I would say, that speed and puts all of these restrictions for a use case that you don't need? So I think we're going to see more and more people building their databases on Web3 using permanent storage as opposed to a blockchain. And I think financial use cases will continue going there. I think we're going to see a lot more stuff happening with data availability, but it's also like something that's not a new idea at this point. Everyone's probably seen Celestia, EigenLayer, Bundler Network, and the sort. So that's kind of the area that I'm really excited about.
One comment or question there. I totally agree on the storage layer. You did mention double spend is the one big fix, but it's also, you mentioned permanence. So Arweave is doing a great job, right? Pay once, store forever, or like for 200 years, and then it becomes de minimis. But the permanence aspect via consensus, I think, is super important in blockchains. Arweave is figuring that out, and others. Filecoin is different because you have to pin and keep pinned. But what are your thoughts on the permanence aspect with consensus in the blockchains? And do you think that's becoming not obsolete, but just evolving in different storage methods?
Well, they also have consensus. It's called proof of. I forgot the exact.
Yeah, I can't remember the name. Yeah.
What is it?
I can't remember the name.
Yeah, it's something. It's called the block weave. It's their own consensus mechanism, and I think that Arweave, having been around for 6 years and having actually worked at Celestia and seen all of the different roll-ups and L2s that we were going to work with, and realizing there is only one L2 that's actually decentralized fully in the same ballpark as Ethereum. It's Fuel version 1. Everything else that's out there, Optimism, Arbitrum, even the most popular ones, whatever, are actually have varying degrees of enormous centralization that hasn't been figured out yet. Fraud proofs are not even a thing, and they might be in their marketing materials, but they aren't in practice. So I think that it's interesting that Arweave is longer track record and more decentralized than almost any of the more used blockchains today. So I think that when you understand like those types of trade-offs, I'm even more bullish on systems that have been tried and true and tested than some of the newer stuff sometimes. Even though I'm really excited about a lot of the like roll-up and modular stuff that's happening.
Cool. Thank you so much for expanding on this. To wake up the room a little bit again, who of you guys is actually a developer? Okay, also some. Okay, you don't know? No, that's good because I want to go a bit more into tooling specifically and just a very direct question. But you have to answer them from different perspectives again because protocol, tooling, and like app specific. What kind of tooling would you actually like to see more in Web3 social? Are you seeing at the moment that people develop maybe with the graph, or Asaf, from your perspective also, what can you provide more as a dApp builder or as a tooling provider in the ecosystem that will help the end user better to use Web3 social?
So this is a topic that I'm very opinionated on. I think that
Great.
the main developing tooling missing is ads. So on all of the social platforms, ads, advertisements.
Ads.
So on all of the centralized platform, if you go and visit the API, you see API for pulling data, you see API for putting posts, and you also see an ads API. And this is a lot of the ways for individuals and brands to promote themselves on the social network. Part of what Addressable does to kind of give the context on that is that we're associating Web 2 with Web 3 data to help marketers find their audiences on social where they spend their time and reach out to that. We had several chats with brands that are available and live on social platforms, also Web3 social platform like Lens, for instance. And when we're talking to them, they're saying, we want to grow our brands, we want to go bigger. And we're asking, great, where do you want to advertise? We want to advertise on Twitter. Why don't you want to advertise on Lens? I mean, it doesn't make a lot of sense, right? I think this is one part of developer tooling that once we have an ads API that is working correctly in a lot of the decentralized social platform, that's going to explode. That's a lot of what we need to put our focus on, if that makes sense.
Cool, love it. What are your opinions?
I'd say in the graph ecosystem, the subgraphs, which are the assembly script API, so close to TypeScript, have found product market fit. They drive most Web3 data throughout the ecosystem. But so you build an assembly script and you query in GraphQL. The graph ecosystem basically came out with substreams, which is based on a Firehose primitive that enables flat files and data streaming, and enables a REST-based API that can up to 100x indexing and syncing speed, which has been a friction point for developers. So that's awesome that it's now Rust-based or assembly script-based APIs, but it's still all in GraphQL. So the graph ecosystem is thinking through how to enable SQL, because SQL is a very strong Web 2, especially data analytics language, and then it's enabling other languages. So the more languages people can build in, the more the developer pool is expanded, and therefore the more things that can be built. So I think it's expanding across multiple languages, across multiple ecosystems to make that Web 2 to Web 3 jump much more simple. And then there are companies building on top of the graph like dAppLooker that enables SQL downloads, and Playgrounds that enables Python downloads for people to be able to tap into all the Web 3 information that is indexed from the 40,000 plus APIs, subgraphs already out there, and it enables that even Web 2 folks to be able to use it, because a lot of folks know Python. It's a much more readable language, and those are fun. Seeing businesses built on something like the graph and enabling totally new use cases. So I'm excited for businesses to build on middleware, on stacks, and that's something that we need to keep seeing more innovation.
Everyone that attends East Global heard what we need to build, okay? Nadar, what are you?
So yeah, I'm like a big fan of people who have actually accomplished something and have a track record of delivering and kind of leaning on them for inspiration or at least direction. And even though those people have one-time successes and are not successful again, I do believe in the fact that they've done it once and therefore they have a lot of perspective that I can take from. So I'm kind of going to read from Jack Dorsey in 2019 when he tweeted out, I'm hiring a couple of engineers, and this was like the origin of Blue Sky. One of the things he said is that the value of social media is shifting away from content hosting and removal and towards recommendation algorithms directing one's attention. Unfortunately, these algorithms are proprietary and can't be chosen or alternatives built, because he's talking about the proprietary nature of Twitter, Instagram, etc. And then the next thing he mentions is existing social media incentivizes frequently lead to attention being focused on content and conversation that sparks controversy and outrage rather than conversation which informs and promotes mental health. So he's basically essentially the long-term thing that he's basically saying is if there was open data, then people would be able to build multiple algorithms and be able to have different experiences. The two things that make a social network valuable are the network itself, like the people you're connected to, and the content that you're given. Everyone has always pointed to the success of TikTok, even though it's a pristine, amazing platform today. Early on, the reason it caught so fire was they had a really great recommendation algorithm. But once you have bought into a network for years, you've built your network, you've invested time, even money, you now have 1,000 followers or 10,000 followers. If that platform decides to change their recommendation algorithm, as Twitter did, then people become upset, but they don't really have any choice to do anything. They're just there, right? You just have to kind of stick to it, or you have to rebuild your following on another platform that may or may not even exist. But with public data, you have these recommendation algorithms that can be built, and we're seeing that happen right now, and that's the most exciting thing to me. In the Lens ecosystem alone, you also see this in Farcaster and Nostr, and also, Farcaster are trying to get into this direction as well, Blue Sky as well, or whatever. You now have, in Lens, I can just speak to alone, around 12 different teams building out recommendation algorithms, and we already have about 6 or 7 of the bigger clients implementing these. So you can go into your settings and you can choose, okay, I want this recommendation algorithm, I'm going to try it out, and you'll have dozens or even hundreds maybe in the future. And then Karma 3 Labs, who I met with yesterday, ex-founder of Harmony, Harvard, the graduates, really stellar engineering team, are building out a build your own algorithm. So you can go in, you can choose how you want things to see. It's going to be very user friendly to the average non-techie person. So I'm really excited about that, and that's the thing that inspires me the most right now is the ability to kind of have a choice and a lot of choices and be able to change things up every day. So I see the same type of shit every day on Twitter. It would be cool if I could maybe see a new feed every day. Maybe I can even click a setting that just shows me a random recommendation algorithm every day. I think that is a huge value proposition, and it's something that just simply isn't possible with traditional social.
With the Lens stack, is that at the SDK level where they can just choose it, or do they have to build it from scratch? From the developer perspective?
The developer can go, for example, to karma3labs.com and just get an API endpoint and plug it into their app. The retrieved data is the same schema as what they would get from any of the, there's a schema standard that everyone goes by. At least for Lens there is. And then that way, you don't have to change the UI as a developer. You literally can have an array of 100 recommendation algorithms, and at load time, if you wanted to just randomize that, the data returned will be the same. And you now have this marketplace of algorithms that can be used. And then what also can happen with all this open data is the fact that all these actions are traceable, in some form or fashion, either on chain or not. You can build out solutions for civil resistance and reputation and stuff, which they're also doing. They're taking some of the Lens data and they're working with MetaMask now to build out some permissionless way for developers to submit apps to an official app store, but they want to kind of filter for bad actors, and that's one of the things that they're doing with that open data.
Amazing. So more or better recommendation algorithms, more ads in a decentralized way, and a lot of tooling that combines a lot of different languages or developer toolings. Last question to the tooling side, and then maybe we can wrap it up also or ask you guys some questions. When we talk about tooling, we talk about low code, no code, we want to integrate as many languages as possible, but how many languages does the developer need to speak or write, or speak and write, and how much do we want to abstract this, right? So my question is, it's also a trend in creating or combining so many languages, but we don't expect engineer or developer to write all of them. What is your take on no code, low code tooling for Web3? And why is your take positive, negative, however it is? Nada, you want to start as DevRel?
Can you repeat the general main
low
point?
code or no code tooling? If you create tooling, how deep do we need to go on the language level? Because if we abstract it, we can actually provide, we can serve more developers because they don't need to write a specific language anymore.
So like, I think if you're a developer, you should learn one language and learn it really well, and then that will teach you the fundamentals of almost every other language that you could ultimately pick up in a week or a month to build just something basic. So I would kind of take that route. JavaScript, Rust, Solidity, those are, if you learn those three, you're like going to be great. But in terms of like more answering your main question, we build for all parts of the stack. We build for every type of developer. At least that's the approach we're taking. We think that because all this work we're doing is essentially building out infrastructure for other developers. We're not building our own client. We're just building back-end software that we need to make it like really simple for developers to build. So we have the smart contracts. Then on top of the smart contracts, we have the API. Then on top of the API, we have the SDK. And on top of the SDK, we have the hooks library. And on top of the hooks library, we have these widgets. So we have 5 levels of the stack. If you're an infrastructure engineer, you're a Solidity developer, you can interact with the smart contracts, build integrations there. Most of the app developers are using the API in some form or fashion. So like you can call the API directly or you can use an SDK. And I think that approach that we're taking is the right approach because every developer that has come into the ecosystem, they could have been starting coding a week ago or 10 years ago. They're all able to actually build an app. And I think if you make that hello world use case extremely easy, they feel like, oh, I've built something, and you now have a like developer that's almost kind of like bought into your system for life in some form or fashion, because they're going to always remember, oh, I can just go build this app really simply. And I think like if everyone takes that approach, then that's really a smart approach, because you can't really build just a single abstraction and expect everyone to use that, because the more abstract, the higher level you are, the less that you can do, and then you limit yourself on the types of sophisticated apps that can be built.
That's an interesting standpoint, because the more you abstract it, actually the more you can reach, depending on what's below it, right? If you combine several toolings and languages with it. But yeah, Asaf, what's your opinion on this?
I think that at the moment, a lot of the builders in blockchain in general and SocialFi in particular are hardcore developers. I think that when you ask the question, like, who's here as a software developer, you saw many hands raised. And I think that for that reason, when focused on this audience, the importance of no-code, low-code is of less importance compared to having a better and wider abstraction layer. But I think that as SocialFi grows from where it is today into where existing Web2 social is found, and we're going into the mass adoption, we'll see people want to build apps that are not necessarily hardcore developers, and they still need the tools. It could be marketers, it could be analysts, it could be people who want to do Twix with AI, like a lot of the applications that we see today over social. And I think that when we get to the point in time in which this is the next barrier to go to, and we want to expand even further, the importance of low code would be dramatic for the growth of the platforms.
I'd say I'm extremely excited about low-code and no-code solutions. Right now, the graph is a developer tool. People use it. They often build their subgraphs, or many people don't even build subgraphs, but they query in GraphQL. What about people that don't know GraphQL? They'd have to learn that. That's a hurdle. What about people that aren't technical? That's where Semiotic Labs, a core dev, one of 6 core devs working on the graph, has been working with AI, so essentially ML, RL stuff internally, making sure to stress test the protocol and increase the efficiency across indexers, curators, and delegators. But now they're thinking through what LLMs in a ChatGPT style no code, so natural language query, can do for folks like us that aren't technical. I'm not technical. I'm not going to probably learn GraphQL or learn to build a subgraph and then query it. But what if I could go to the graph and say, how many ENS holders or how many ENS addresses were added to ECC over this date? And it just automatically codes that GraphQL. One of the biggest powers of the graph is that all of the most of the information in Web3 is already indexed, organizable, and that's extremely powerful. It's available to all of us. We just need to know how to access it. So a no-code solution, natural language solution via LLM technology is awesome, and it's already being thought through in the graph ecosystem by Semiotic Labs as well as others. So I'm excited to see that one day.
I share this opinion a lot. I think it's great. And it actually somehow closes also or leads us to this question of adoption, right? Because now it's not only a question about developer adoption, because user adoption overall. Your developers are users, but what you just said, the graph can be then used by also people that don't have an engineering background, where we want to get in the end, right? Web3 social protocol should not only be used by the engineers itself, but also by the users. Thank you so much, everyone. This was a great panel. I hope you guys enjoyed it as well. I would like to close it here. I don't think we should take any questions, but we close this here, and you guys are around, and then you can talk with the panelists.
Thanks for having us.
I will just say one last thing.
Yes,
if
please.
you want to join Lens, you can go to lens.xyz. There's a new website where you can just click a button and get a handle, or you can just come find me at some point and I can give you one either way. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
You should all join. Yes, thank you, Nada. Thank you so much.